Welcome to our 10th Character Evolution Cast episode, everyone. 2019 is apparently the year of milestones, and we are so happy to have you along for the ride. We've been really excited to bring all of these amazing player-focused advice episodes to you on a monthly basis, and we're really looking forward to some more of the topics that we have planned in the future. So buckle up for an amazing discussion this episode with the folks at Pod of Love, Ben and Mel, as we discuss adding romance into our games. But first, some announcements. Guess what? Last week we hit 54 episodes released. If you don't count episode 0, this episode marks 54 episodes full of great content. Also, that's the exact amount of player characters we've created so far altogether, between Series 1 and 13. To celebrate, we're going to start a contest. Starting today through to the release of our next series on March 18th, we will be accepting drawings of any of the characters that have been created on our show, from Series 1 all the way through to the up-and-coming Series 14. To enter, please @ CreationCast on Twitter with the hashtag C3ArtContest. Email us at charactercreationcast@gmail.com or post under our Fan Creations channel on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. You can enter as many times as you like, and we'll be narrowing down the selections to our favorites, and then our fans will be able to vote on their favorites. The winner of this contest will get, at the very least, a gift card that can be used for art supplies, as well as a custom Character Creation Cast piece of memorabilia. This one in the form of some very nice custom drink coasters. There may be even more prizes involved, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So, feel free to submit your entries over the next few weeks. We're looking forward to seeing all the amazing people you can bring to life through your art. Finally, Amelia is feeling under the weather this weekend, so we'll have to wait until next time to get another review. But until then, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Podchaser, or Facebook, and we'll get to reading it as soon as we are able. With all of that out of the way, sit back, get cozy, and be ready to learn all about how to effectively add romance into your own games at home. Enjoy!
Welcome to Character Evolution Cast, a show where we discuss what to do with all of those characters we just made. I'm one of your hosts, Amelia, and today my co-host Ryan and I are joined by Ben and Mel of the Pod of Love podcast to talk about navigating romance at the table.
Welcome to Character Evolution Cast, both of you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much
for having us.
Yeah.
We're very excited to be here.
I'm more excited to be here than Ben is. I just want to, that's canon now.
Just wanted to be clear, Mel is the most excited.
It's true. You can tell that I'm only so excited because my hat is facing forward and I haven't turned it around backwards. That's how you know I'll be really excited.
The excitement level is rising. It's happened. Oh, he's so excited now. We're equally excited. It's over.
There's still time. There's a lot of show left. We'll win you back. Mel, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and some of the cool stuff that you are involved in?
Sure. I'm a mom and a wife and a Christian and a school principal, and I like to play games. And so because I like to play games, we started this podcast, Pod of Love, about playing romance mostly tabletop games, right? Would you say? But we play all kinds of games, and so much so that Ben found a way to incorporate that into, what he does for a living. And it's something that when I don't have our children, that I can participate in. And I really enjoy any time that Ben and I get to play games together because it's fun.
Aww. Ben, how about yourself?
So I'm a co-host with Mel of Pod of Love, and I'm one of the founders of the All Ports Open podcast network where Pod of Love exists. And so on that network, I'm a part of a number of other podcasts. I'm a co-host of a video game and theology podcast called No Avatars Allowed. I've been on other podcasts like Refugees of Esmeralda, which is a world building actual play podcast. Let's see, what other podcasts am I on? There's a new podcast we're launching called E10 Plays. We're going to be playing Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I also edit a bunch of different podcasts, like produce podcasts for people. And I have a podcast I've done for a long time that's part of my professional life called Priest Pulse, and I do that. And I'm also a parish Episcopal priest, which a lot of people are like,
are you a priest?
To find out about.
You're
Thank you.
a priest.
Thank you for making that joke literally every single time I say that.
I've actually said it twice already today.
I know. In this call. Yeah, I know. I was here for it.
You're welcome.
So that's what I do.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
All right. One of our goals on Character Creation Cast, aside from making amazing people, is to introduce our audience to people who are doing amazing things in the RPG world. So we are going to start there. And in case people don't know, you two are married.
We are?
Mel is just finding out for the first time. This is a shock. What a way to find out.
Priest magic.
Yes.
Yeah, somehow I found a way to secretly marry you. You didn't know. That's not true. You can't marry without consent. You look sad. This is an audio format.
I was just thinking about all the priests that were offended by you secretly marrying me.
Yeah, right. Fair enough.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us about any ways that playing role-playing games together has changed your relationship?
Well, apparently we're married now.
Yeah, I did that in the game. It was real, though. It wasn't fictional.
If you get married in the game, you get married in real life.
No, definitely not good. Definitely not.
Go ahead, you start.
Okay, sure.
It's the ultimate LARP.
Life is the ultimate LARP, Ryan.
That needs to be a t-shirt.
Life is the ultimate LARP. I'm sure people have gamified weddings. And I know that people have tried and are trying to gamify church experiences, but that's like a whole nother subject altogether.
How about the question?
Yeah, the question. Well, I was just thinking earlier about how so our kids sometimes go a little crazy. And
understatement.
And sometimes can be a bit of a handful. We just spent the last 3 days traveling with them in the van for 8 hours at a time, and so it was intense. And so I was just thinking about how
it was in a van. I'm sorry.
I'm so excited you're here, Mel. I'm so excited for this.
I really like this.
I was just thinking about how playing games gives us an opportunity to have us time, and then also to share that with our kids too, because we actually were playing The Quiet Year with our 7-year-old daughter Rose just today. So it gives really special bonding time.
She's terrifying, by the way.
She is. She's a scary mind. Yeah.
She said, "I want the graveyard."
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Why are they like that? My son is 7 too, and every so often he says things, and I'm like, dude, I know that you don't know the context of how creepy you sound, but you sound real creepy right now.
Unfortunately, I think Rose knows how creepy she sounds. Sorry, dear. Please continue.
Oh, no. I think it's... No, so it gives us time, bonding time for us time, which is in a relationship, man, how valuable is, especially when you have kids, how valuable is us time.
So many kids.
Exactly. But I think anybody, even if you don't have kids, the busyness of life, to set that time apart to have fun and play, let you sort of explore and deepen your relationship and grow closer and all that stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, what he said. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I definitely agree. And I think that us time is important, and we will play, what's the name of the game we play? I always mix it up. Fog or Pod? Fog of Love.
One of them is our show title, and the other one is a game we play a lot.
So we'll play that game, but we also play a whole bunch of other games.
Right.
We have a shelf and shelves full. But when we have an opportunity, like I said, to go to our church's game night, just the two of us, that's also really fun. And we try and play the same thing whenever possible so that we're experiencing new games together. Or like sometimes Ben will play a game. Like we played Betrayal. What was it called? Which Betrayal was it?
Which one? Like Legacy Betrayal or Betrayal
Legacy.
House on the Hill? Yeah.
It was...
it was Legacy.
Legacy Betrayal. And Ben was telling me all about it when he came home. And I was like, oh, it's so cool. You know, you like make your own game essentially. And no two games are alike. And I was like, this sounds amazing. I must play it. And so we got to play it the next time that I went, which is really cool. So, you know, that is an experience we've had a couple times. But it also gives us like, I don't know, it's so important to have shared interests. And especially like we talk about all the time how this is our second marriage and we've learned a lot of the things not to do. And I think anytime you have even a little bit of the same interest, it's important to pour into that and, you know, bond over whatever you can. So, you know, we do have a lot of other similar interests, but this is like an active interest, which is really cool because like we could go to Thirsty Dice, which is a local, really awesome cafe type restaurant game playing place where we recorded an episode recently. You know, we could go out and do that as a date. We could go and bring our kids. And I think that in addition to strengthening our relationship, it definitely strengthens our relationship with our family, with the people that we play D&D with who are not in our family, our immediate family. But also it inspires creativity. And I'm so proud that my 7-year-old is so interested and asking like, can I play D&D? I made my own character. She woke up early this morning and said, I wrote my character's backstory.
Oh, nice.
So that kind of stuff is really exciting to me because she's a bright kid to begin with, but the more she does things like that, the smarter she's going to become and the more creative and innovative. And Lord knows the world needs more people who are thinking outside of the box. So I hope that she's one of them, and I think gaming will play a role in that.
I think role-playing with each other also sort of like it just you learn things about your partner when you watch them role play. You like explore dimensions of their character. You kind of like gain new insights into who they are by watching them role play. So that's something else that I find.
Yeah, and real quick, it's interesting. We just played Nightmare Mode of Fog of Love, and you know it's called Nightmare Mode because you play a real version of yourself. You know, like how you would actually make the decisions instead of playing as a character, which is the way the game was originally designed. And we're like, okay, we're finally going to sit down and play this. We hope we're still married when we're done. And it was not a nightmare at all. And I was like, well, I guess we're doing something right.
It's kind of boring, actually.
Like he would make a decision. He would make a decision. I would be like, yeah, me too. And I knew you were going to say that. Or we'd have different decisions, but I'd be like, yeah, but I knew that's what you were going to say.
I mean, I think that, so my family does a lot of gaming. A lot of my siblings do role-playing games. We've actually never played together. But at Christmas and other holidays and stuff, when we're all together, I'm one of 5 kids, and then my parents, we all sit down and play board games and stuff. And like, we're all hyper competitive about it, but it's our family bonding experience. And I love like having that shared space and that thing that we all love to do. And I've started doing some gaming with my kids. My son is really into it, and I love how it teaches them to think outside of the box and to do like creative problem solving. I love seeing like the weird things that their imaginations come up with. I love and it works on so many of their other like skills, you know, like math and counting and writing and, you know, like all of that kind of stuff too is all built in there, but it's a game. And so we're just going to make it up. And it's just it's so much fun. And like, I think gaming builds all kinds of relationships that way. My ex-husband and I would always go, like that was our every other Saturday night, we would go and play D&D or L5R or whatever it was at the time. And it was like, that was our like adult time, was like to go to our gaming group and play that game. And like, I was so thankful for that because I love my children dearly, but sometimes I want to talk to adults. As much as I even like gaming with my kids, like...
I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
Speaking of gaming with kids, I remember recently on one of our trips to Maine. No, actually, we went on a road trip and we just happened to be in Maine. Our daughter Rose ran a game of No Thank You Evil for her sister Charlie.
Oh, nice.
And it was, and her dad Ben, and it was amazing, just like how excited she was about it. She was working on it in the car all day. And what happened was we said, well, maybe we can play. I forget what was going on. We ran out of time. It was late. The kids had to go to bed. She starts bawling. I worked so hard on this. Oh. We said, honey, we never promised it would happen today, but I love that you worked so hard on it. We'll play tomorrow unless something terrible happens. And so she finally got to do it. But it was just such a cool experience. And like, I'm so thankful even that game designers are paying attention to kids like that, because I remember when we played No Thank You Evil, it was at the first PAX Unplugged, and we didn't have the kids with us that year. But who did we demo it with?
Oh, it was Darcy Ross.
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? Darcy Ross demoed it for us. And I was like, this is amazing. We need to go buy it right now. And it was probably one of the best purchases for our whole family that I think we've ever made. Because every summer when we have Charlie here with us, the girls play at least once, and they're constantly begging to play. So,
yeah, I got it for Nate for Christmas a couple years ago, and we love it. We did a bonus episode for the One Shot Patreon feed where I sat down with my 2 kids and we made characters for it. And Nathan has been talking about this game that he wants to play, like where there's like muffin pirates and they steal all the muffins in town or something like that. And he keeps telling me to run it. And I was like, no, it's your story. You need to run this game. And then last time I was over at Darcy's house, she was like, well, he needs the guidebook. And so she went into her closet and pulled out a bunch of books and was like, here, take this home to Nate. So he's reading up on that now. So hopefully he'll get to run his game soon.
Yeah, that trip
he won't wait till he's 30 to GM a game.
Yeah.
That trip that we were on was over a week long, and in the van, Rose was reading the what is it called?
Oh yeah, whatever the
guide.
Whatever the book is about being a guide. I can't think of the title.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm a Guide or something like that. Yeah. So I want to know from you guys, what led you to decide to take this gaming from a hobby into making a podcast about it?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was already doing a bunch of podcasts for a while, and me and some other folks were forming a podcast network around games primarily, and Mel and I had just started playing Fog of Love, and we decided, like, I guess we kind of saw a lack of a romance actual play podcast in the actual play world, which is, we were both plugged into actual play world, and we like romance stories, and we enjoyed the idea of doing a lot of romance actual play and just role playing together. And we just decided, like, let's try it. Let's give it we sort of went from like idea to reality really fast. I mean, like within I don't even know.
Within one game. We played one game that we didn't record.
That's right. So we decided to just start recording after that. And then we sort of figured out what the show was going to be like as we were making it.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely has been a progression, but I don't know. I honestly still think of it as a hobby. Like, I love playing games with my husband, and now we're just recording our dynamic to share with everyone else. Because it's a fun experience for us. We really enjoy telling stories, good stories, which also gives us the opportunity to shed light on other people's actual stories. We talk a lot about transgender and I mean, all kinds of issues, honestly, but most of them stemming from and revolving around romance. And it's just, important, I guess, to get those stories out into the world, whether they're someone's actual story or a fictional story that people can relate to. That's really important to me. It might be because I was an English major in college. I don't know. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure.
Just using stories, you mean like creating
connecting through stories, because that's kind of always how I've been. That's how I build relationships at work. I listen, I remember, you kind of build onto your story, your relationship with a person, for lack of a better term. But, I don't know. I just think, like I said, I think this is still a hobby. It's a more polished hobby that we have. But really, I saw that my husband really enjoyed doing something, and that was making podcasts. And I could see him light up when he talks about it. And he's really good at what he does. So I said, you're welcome. And I said, yeah, totally. We should make a podcast. And they were just about to launch this brand new network. And I said, all right, let's get it on the ground floor. Even if this doesn't turn out to be anything but what we're doing right now, it's still super fun, and I want to be a part of it. So
a romance AP was pretty natural for me because romance has always sort of been part of my role-playing experience. So it was sort of a natural fit for me to do it.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, maybe. Should I elaborate on it right now? Or I don't know if we're going to get into this more or not, but I just have always experienced like romantic and sexual relationships like in character at the table from like my earliest gaming experiences. Some of my first.
So you mean when you were 10?
No, I wasn't 10 when I started gaming, but I was in high school. But it's just like always been an aspect of playing at the table that's I've been drawn to, I think, naturally. And I never really like thought about it or dwelled on it for very long. It was just sort of natural. And then, so like, it was just a natural fit for me to do it. And now I've reflected on it and then I looked back and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I always enjoyed romance at the table, like romance and gaming, without even really noticing.
I think that like once you start doing podcasts too, it like forces you to continue doing that because now you have a schedule and you have like, because being an adult, there's no time. Like there's never enough time, especially like when you have a job and kids and hobbies and all of that kind of stuff. There's just not enough time. And I think that like playing for an AP has been so valuable to me in making sure that I make time to do it because there's a deadline. We have to play this game. Sorry, guys. Like I have to do it. So, I mean, it sort of forces you to like really put that as something that's important too, which I enjoy about it. I know for some people that's probably a stressor, but I think that it forces you to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can put it on your calendar like any meeting. You know what I mean? It's like, but it's a fun meeting.
Yeah, if I'm at work looking at my calendar and I'm like, I wonder what Ben's up to, or like I'm trying to schedule, so I wonder what Ben's up to. I'm like, okay, he's recording this podcast right now, and tomorrow he's not free from 10 to 3 because he's recording this podcast.
Mm-hmm. I know how that goes. Mm-hmm. Now, have you found it difficult to play these sorts of romantic games and explore these sorts of concepts in a more public forum?
What do you think? Have you had any challenge with it?
Yes, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay. All right. I don't think I personally have. And I think that's for a few reasons. Like, it's not unusual for me to, like, first of all, I've been doing podcasts a lot longer than we've been doing this one. And so even though this is like with my spouse and exploring, so like issues of like romance, sexuality, and then also gender and sexuality in that way, like exploring those very personal things, like the idea of being sort of public. And also, I'm a public figure, like, as a job. So, like, I'm used to being public in a certain... Stop it. I'm used to being public facing...
I heard you were a priest.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere, too.
Is that true?
Believe it or not, it is. I'm used to being public facing, period. And I'm used to, like, putting my thoughts out there in a podcast. And, like, so I think part of it is just, like, that's...
Or at the pulpit.
Very used to that. Yeah, I'm just very used to that. So that's part of it. But then also, like, I guess because I, like, I've been role playing for so freaking long. Like, I don't even know how long it would be now. I'd have to like really stop it and do the math, and I'm bad at math.
Like 20 years.
Yeah, or more. Yeah, something like that. So, like, because I've been role playing for so long, I think that like it's like flipping a switch. I like go into a different space. And like, I'm so used to existing in sort of this safe space that gaming creates to explore like who you are and sort of going into that like golden circle space. I think I'm just so used to that it didn't really I didn't really have much of a like weirdness or a weird experience doing this kind of content. What about you? So
I am very opinionated, and if you get me going about something, I can get really, I don't know if heated's the right word because I don't get mad easily, but I get very passionate about and put a lot of energy behind certain things. So the thing that's been most difficult to me is not like exploring these things, because Ben and I have these conversations off the air constantly, but it's remembering that like this is being recorded and I don't want to ever have to censor myself, but I do have to choose carefully what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for a school full of children from pre-K through 8th grade, and their parents are paying for their education because it's a private school. And that could be problematic for me because I have certain beliefs that may not align with those beliefs that the people that I work with or even work for have, and I think we're all entitled to that. I don't think that means anything less about me, or them, honestly. But I think that I don't feel the freedom to say outwardly what I might say in the way I might say certain things if this were a paying job that I had. Because there are certain things I'll say at school with reckless abandon, right? Like, I don't care if they're not paying attention. If the kids are not paying attention, it's your fault. So what are we going to do to fix it? And teachers are going to get really mad, but we're going to fix it. But I can't say things that evoke that same kind of response through our podcast. And so sometimes that's really tough for me.
So I think maybe I should have a little more like sort of fear and trembling about some of the stuff we do on our show than I really do professionally. Like, because like sometimes I stop and think, members of my congregation maybe would listen to this and we explore some sexuality space that like it could be a little, I could say, make a comment or embody something on the show that someone might have something to say about. But then I also had an experience where I was at my diocesan office. I was at my bishop's office, who's my boss, and not my bishop, thank God, but like someone on his staff, like really close to his like desk is like 10 feet from the bishop's office door. Told me that he's a huge fan of Pot of Love and listens to our show all the time.
Did you tell me this?
I don't think I did. And so it was like, oh, so like, wow, that's like, that hits really close to the bishop's desk, like it's like really close. So,
but I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
I just think that like your job is a vocation and social justice is a big part of what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to be outspoken about those things. And I don't
even just mean that though. I mean like kind of like, I don't know, there, some of the sexual or like romantic content maybe sometimes.
You mean because you answered the furry question?
No, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, but there's also the reality that like you guys are married and you have kids. Yeah. So like, I would hope that most people can put like 2 and 2 together. But,
yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. You
know.
Well, they'd be wrong because we don't have any
I'm always
kids
like,
together.
I can prove that I had sex at least twice. So,
but not with my husband. So figure that one out.
Yeah, we don't have kids together. We don't have our own. Yeah, we don't. I guess no one has any proof yet about us. This is weird.
I'm cool. I probably shouldn't be cool, but I'm cool.
I
mean, that's the thing, though. I'm a Catholic school principal, and you're not in good standing with the church unless your first marriage is annulled in the Catholic Church and you are actually legally divorced. And there's a lot of things that follow that, right? Or go along with that. There are a lot of beliefs that I have that align very well with Catholic values. And I work every day to instill not only my children, but the children at school with those values as well. And the staff too. Like I'm thinking about the decisions I'm making on the regular and what message that sends. But there's also a lot of things that I don't say outwardly that are still in my head because, I always tell Ben, I think that I really probably shouldn't even say this out loud, but the best way to blow something up is from the inside. Okay. SWAT team, do not descend on me. I don't mean an actual explosion, but I think that if you're going to make any kind of change, especially lasting change, you can't say, well, I don't agree with this, so I'm leaving, right? Like I agree with all these wonderful things. How can we change these other things that are not so great? But until then, I have to bite my tongue sometimes. And that's a learning experience in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a thing that I've had to learn because I am similarly incredibly passionate about things. And my family is very Catholic. And, like they were incredibly supportive when I got divorced and, like we're really great about that. But there is that reality of like, okay, you're divorced now. And the fact that I am bisexual, like that was a whole thing. So, I mean, there's parts of it that are like, there are a lot of things about being Catholic that I was like, this is super great. I really like this. And there are a lot of things that I'm like, that's a bummer.
I think it's really important that we practice what we preach. And I think that, for me, and I don't mind saying this openly to anyone who asks, there's the Catholic Church's general belief on gender and sexuality, whatever. But I think that if Jesus is calling us to love everyone as ourselves, then it doesn't matter what quote unquote flaws they have. You're still tasked with loving them and respecting them. So, in that way, like it's important for me as somebody who does not identify as bisexual and who does identify as a cisgendered middle-class white lady, honestly, like to tell these stories that don't necessarily reflect my own experience, because in addition to getting the stories out there and hearing from people who are actually living these situations, but also telling these stories through our podcast, it shows that I don't identify as any of these things, but I can understand what it might be to have a similar experience, because we all can. We all have empathy.
Well, and I think that it's important, too, that, when you realize that you're in that situation where you have that kind of privilege, to say, it's crappy, but, people will listen to my voice more than they will to someone else's, and to be able to say, okay, I'm going to use this then to do these things.
Right.
And I think that that's really important, too, is that, you use that platform that you have to do good things and, to try and make those positive changes.
Absolutely.
So now we know a little bit more about you guys. We are going to get into the fun part of this. Not that the rest of it hasn't been fun. As usual, our goal here is to help people be better players. And we try to gear our discussions toward how players, not just GMs, can improve their experiences at the table. It might be too late for Valentine's Day, but we still think that romance is worth talking about. And so today we are going to dig into how you can add that concept into your games.
Yeah.
Every day is Valentine's Day.
If you try hard and believe in yourself.
Hallmark would love that. Hallmark would love every day to be Valentine's Day.
I mean, so would I.
I like chocolate, and yeah, I'm for it. I look decent in red.
Truth.
So romance is a central plot point in a lot of stories, so it isn't out of place in role-playing games. Even so, it can be complicated to navigate that area, and for people new to the idea, it can feel pretty daunting. So our goal for today is to help you figure out how to make your in-game romance successful.
Point number 1, or probably also number 0, we should talk about expectations and boundaries. Mm-hmm. We talked a lot about this in our Starcrossed episodes and in our recent Session 0 and safety episodes. But do you have any advice for people on how they can find their comfort zone and how to communicate that to other people at the table?
We were talking about this earlier today, and I think that the idea of the X card is just so important. And to have a discussion before you even foray into game playing of any kind, these are our norms. These are our non-negotiables as a group. And if somebody says, I can't handle this, I don't want to do this, or anything like that, there's no judgment. You just exit and move it on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that finding your comfort zone is a little bit tricky. It's I was thinking a lot about how do you give people advice to find your comfort zone. One of the best parts about gaming is so sort of through the act of the play, we can sort of learn more about ourselves and what our comfort zones are. And that is why an X card is so valuable. It is why lines and veils are so helpful. But even more so than that, sort of brushing up on the edges of where your comfort is. And so finding and with who your comfort is. Cause I know in my experience, role playing romance is different depending on a lot of different factors in that. So I think it's just sort of trial and error and sort of experiencing it in hopefully what is a safe space for everybody, is a good way to find your sort of comfort zone and to think intentionally about it. I mean, we think about all kinds of stuff when we do our character creation and when we think about who this character is going to be in his backstory. But how often do we think about romance and sexuality when we think about character backstories? In my view, not enough. I think that it's a really cool way to think about your character, to think about what are past romances this character's had? What are past relationships, if any, this character's had? Is this person looking for love and romance and relationship, or are they, or not? And exploring that in sort of backstory stuff, character creation stuff.
I think that's why the X card is so important, because if you have that, you are in a safe space to test your boundaries and say, you know what? I don't know if I feel comfortable, but I'm going to try this, knowing that I can back out at any time and with no judgment from anybody in my gaming group. That's really important. And again, that creates stronger bonds, because if you're with these people who are safe people trying these things that are new things, then, good things are bound to happen. And I think too, our relationships with other people, all kinds of relationships, shape who we are, fundamentally. Even like if you talk to my therapist, she'll tell you that I do certain things because that's what my mom did, like,
Right.
And that's funny because it's funny, but it's also the truth.
It's true.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. And so from the day we're born, our lives are being shaped. Who we are is being shaped by the relationships we have with other people, both positive and negative. And I, as a Christian, would throw in the element of our relationship with God as well, which is also ever changing for most people, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I really like the point that you made about the backstories. Not enough people include romance in the backstories of characters, and it made me think back to, I would say, almost all of my characters, if not all of them, had practically no romance in the backstory at all, but would eventually have, a lot of them would eventually have some sort of romantic feelings for one of the NPCs or something like that. And it never really dawned on me until just now to include that. And it makes so much sense to flesh out your characters with those sorts of things, not only to make them more real, but now your game master has something extra to kind of toss your way for maybe an ex-lover comes into your neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I've been playing through, what is it called? Red Dead Redemption 2. And, this character feels like a real person because, like, oh, here's his ex-lover, and we're going to explore that space. And any GM would love to have that kind of valuable sort of stuff to use for their players.
I mean, aside from that, though, like, romance, I guess, positive and negative experiences determine, like, how your character is going to react to things, or I mean, how you as a person will react to things. So your character may have some kind of complex because of a previous relationship, or your character may not have ever had a previous relationship. So he or she or they are completely naive, and don't understand someone else's advances. Like, there's so much depth of character you can build there when you're just thinking about this one aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of room to explore those things if you have, an X card and you have those kinds of conversations up front to say, like, okay, we're going to try this out. We are going to kind of push these boundaries. And as long as everybody around you is also okay with that and knows that you have the right to back out and you have the right to kind of, explore that to your comfort level. I always go back to the fact that your role-playing group is another form of a relationship. And like any other relationship, communication is what it needs to thrive. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's always the biggest thing, is being able to talk to people openly about your feelings on these subjects. And it can be awkward and weird sometimes, but I think that they're important discussions to have anyway, to say, I'm comfortable with these things. Or, like if Ryan and I were playing together, for me to say, I'd like to play out a romantic storyline, and for Ryan to have the room to be like, you know what, I really don't want to because that's uncomfortable for me. And like, we should be able to have those discussions and go back and forth without even having to get to the X card at that point, like to be able to upfront say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And then to have something like the X card as that safety net to fall back on.
Yeah, I agree. And, some people might find the concept of romance in gaming to be kind of daunting, because they kind of jump to the conclusion of, this is something super intimate, super personal, or even just pure sexual in nature. But romance, which we're kind of using as a catch-all term here, can play out in a lot of different ways. So can you talk about some of the different levels of love and relationships that we might be able to find in a game?
Yeah, so I've been, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking back to a lot of different, versions of romance that I've explored through gaming, or either as a player or as a GM, like watch my players go through. And it is interesting how there's it really manifests in different ways. And all the examples that are really coming to my mind are all from not romance games, but from playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, and exploring that space in D&D. So I mean, I think one of the easiest ways if you're looking to explore your comfort zone is to sort of start with what I think is sort of a soft start. Like start with like not necessarily even another player, but an NPC, and to start with something like a pretty like, I don't know, like a committed relationship, like a marriage. Like one of the first ways I realized that you could have romance in your games is that one of my players, when I was running a game, played someone who was married, and his spouse was with the party. And so like it just sort of naturally happened. It's actually not my first experience I ever had role playing romance. I actually had a sexual encounter with another player at the table, another PC. I was a PC and I was another PC. So my first one was actually sex, straight up sex. Like I was a bard. He was actually playing a succubus, and it's not a joke.
Well, that's kind of natural then.
Yeah, and we had sex. Actually, I think we were in. Man, we might have been in. Well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, so my first experience was sexual in nature. So that's sort of like different ways that I've experienced. But I think it's like if you're looking for your comfort zone, you can start with a PC. You could try flirting start with an NPC, or you could try flirting with PCs and just see how that goes. I don't know. What do you think? Why are you blinking at me?
Winking.
Is that you're flirting with me? Are you like
Yes.
Is it working?
Apparently not.
Very much so. Oh, definitely.
Good answer.
Yeah, I know in the Shadow of the Cabal game we're playing right now, my character is married to another one of the PCs. And really at this point, like the level of relationship that has come up is just like, we're having dinner together again. Like, it's not like we have not explored really much beyond that. And really at this point, it is just like a way to create an attachment to another player character and kind of have those like threads between people. But it is a pretty comfortable space to explore, because it's like we don't really, there hasn't been anything beyond just like, well, we live in the same house, we have the same last name, and we eat dinner together. Like that's the extent of it. And that's not to say that like marriage doesn't involve other stuff, but in that space at the table, that is a form of a romantic relationship, and one that has been really comfortable to play out, I think.
Well, I can add to that a little bit. I have actually listened to the first 2 episodes of Shadow of the Cabal Season 2, and I have noticed that your 2 characters have a lot of these like little asides with one another that are a lot more candid than with all the other characters. And knowing the setting of Rokugan and whatnot, and all of the like decorum around like social interactions, that sort of like casual conversation is actually very kind of intimate in a way.
And I think it's really powerful, and I think it's a good way to like almost get an internal monologue in a game like that, where like everything has such like high social standards and you have to maintain such a high level of etiquette and decorum all the time, that like having that relationship allows us to kind of like let down some of that and have like frank conversations. And like I said, you kind of get a better idea of what people are feeling in those situations, because you're always going to be hopefully more honest with your spouse than you are with, random dude down the street.
Seeing those masks fall for those little asides is really cool. And it adds that extra little intangible romantic feeling that I haven't really picked up on in other podcasts that have like a slight romantic
without it ever having to feel awkward, because it is just like pretty like regular conversation. But like I said, because you drop some of that, like it becomes more informal, that it then feels much more intimate.
Yeah, I think also as I'm thinking this through, playing we were talking about romance in non-romance themed games, but of course on our show we play romance games, and actually that's probably a really good way to like explore these different ways you can do romance in games, is by just play a romance game where you like kind of are forced to. So like play Starcrossed, you're going to have to flirt with the other person to some degree.
Fog of Love too.
Play Fog of Love, you're going to have to like do all kinds of different romantic situations, and then sort of forces you to like okay, how do I role play flirting in a way that I'm comfortable with and I feel okay with? Because that one can be, I think, even more tough than committed relationships.
Let me know when you figure that one out, because
Yeah, it's super awkward. I mean, I'm bad at it in real life. Like, it's, I'm not any better at it at the table. I'm bad when I like want to flirt with someone. I'm like even worse at it when I'm like pretending to want to flirt with someone.
the struggle is real.
I was running for a game that Mel and I play just recently, and a sort of flirtatious encounter happened between me playing an NPC and one of our PCs, and like she initiated it where she was flirting with the NPC, and like my wife is in the game, her husband's in the game, and that was what on our Monday night game. I don't want to name any names, so it just happened like last week.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, so it was like I'm like flirting with this person, so I'm like trying to think about, okay, like I think I know what I would say to flirt here. Okay, so am I uncomfortable flirting in character with this person? Like, so yeah, that was an interesting sort of experience.
I want you guys to know this is the first time we've ever actually discussed this together.
Yeah, it is. That's true. We never discussed it after you were there for it.
So for whatever it's worth, I didn't care. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, well, definitely it didn't seem like either of the other partners who were happened to be playing in the game.
We also have role played before.
Right. But it was just like, for me, it was like, okay, what level of flirting do I feel comfortable introducing in this? And to be honest, even though I think about this stuff a lot, we didn't have like a conversation beforehand at any point about particularly romance and sexuality and like what people were comfortable with. So it made me think like this is something we should talk about for our group, since we just sort of dove headfirst in, and a player initiated it, right? Which I think is great. Like I think players should not just initiate romance if they want it, but like really talk about it, especially with your GM and the other players too, sure. But like, hey, I want my character to have a romantic plotline or a sexual plotline or sexuality to express or whatever. Like, and to name that stuff out loud. Yeah.
I think to take it a little bit deeper too, like you should have all of those conversations, because you don't know what other people are bringing to the table. There's a pun for you. You don't know what other people are bringing with them, in their past experiences sometimes, when you sit down to play a game, and a number of things could be triggering that you or I would not ever have thought of, so I think those conversations are really important, and, should be a good habit that people get into, including us.
And I think it's never too late to have those conversations. We always talk about it in the form of a session 0. But I think sometimes you sit down to play a game, and especially when you're playing in a longer campaign, sometimes the story veers places that you weren't really planning on. And so I think that it's okay to, at that point, when if you're 10 sessions into a game and all of a sudden there is this romantic plot line, it's okay to stop at that point and say, you know what, now that we've realized this is going to be a part of our game, let's talk about it. Because I think up front you don't always know those things, but it's never too late to have those discussions.
So maybe instead of, or in addition to the X card, you need a discussion card, like, hey, or like a pause button. We need to stop and talk about this.
Yeah, there is a name for that, isn't there? I can't think of what it is.
I just made it up. It's called a pause button.
Okay.
Script change.
There's a script change safety tool that has like a pause, fast forward, rewind, that kind of covers the kind of X card, getting rid of it with the rewind or replaying it, or there's like a play-by-play where you can slow things down and check in more consistently, which it's a pretty intuitive and easy to understand safety tool that, Bree Sheldon created? Yeah.
And they have designed it so that it's A, intuitive, but B, it sort of expands on the X card so that you have other options besides no. So it's, like let's move forward cautiously, or, I think I like the rewind one too, where it's like, okay, I didn't entirely understand what just happened too. So like, can we talk it out? And, or I don't like this thing. Let's just start this scene over and pretend we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Which I think that, you're playing a game, there should be opportunities to do that. I know that some people are like, you can't undo what you did, but it's like,
you can.
We're having fun.
The GM can do whatever.
Yeah,
so
right.
You can. You're at the table. well, you're making it up. Like, people have magic. It's fine. You can do, if there are fairies, you can also rewind.
Yes. And comics and some movie series have retconned things multiple times, even years later. So why can't you do that at the table in the same 3 to 6 hour session or whatever with your friends when it doesn't matter what the result is?
Yeah, exactly.
I try to retcon things frequently, but Ben often does not let me.
Like in our real lives or like in...
No, but that is a great idea. Wow.
I thought you meant like in our real life, like
No,
real...
I meant when I renamed one of our characters very incorrectly by accident.
Oh, I don't know if that's retconning as much as just like funny mistakes.
Well, it's canon now because it's too late. Do you have suggestions for players who want to explore in-character romantic situations but don't necessarily feel comfortable in their own ability to do that?
Yeah, so the one I just thought of a few minutes ago, I like, I thought of it and I like it, which is try playing romance games. Man, the first time we played Star-Crossed,
Oh, it was so hard.
it was so hard.
And we were married. I mean, we still are,
And we
but we
play
were
romance
married then
games.
too.
We play romance games all the time.
It was so difficult. We're not married anymore.
Yeah, right. It was hard. Like, it was hard for a lot of reasons the first time we played. But like sort of exploring that, because StarCraft in particular takes you into such a unique sort of space, like that will they, won't they space, and then the sort of like subtle flirtation space, and even challenging some people to like be the follow and be the lead and all that. I think,
And that is challenging.
it is. It is challenging. So yeah, no, I don't know. Play that's one thing. Play romance games and try that. But I don't know. What do you think, dear?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that's a good suggestion. I just have a conversation. Like, I was thinking this would be a really cool story to tell, but I'm not sure if I feel confident in playing it out. And then see who's willing to help you out.
Yeah, I think the beauty of romance games is that they have built-in mechanics to facilitate the things that you might feel awkward about. So you're not just like rolling charisma and then you have to play this out.
Right.
They have built-in mechanics to say, this is what it looks like when you do this thing. And so I think that can kind of help you find that space. And if you work within that framework, hopefully eventually you can take that out of that framework and move it into a different game, because having the tools already built in can make you feel a little more comfortable. And I think that like creativity is often built within restricted spaces because you have to work within what you are given, rather than just being like, well, I don't know, find a way to flirt with somebody. Like, where do I start with that? Like, that's incredibly overwhelming.
I think that's why we had such a, I don't want to say difficult, because we did have a good experience overall with Starcross. I almost said StarCraft. That's why we did have such a good experience overall with Starcross. But, a lot of that scaffolding that is taken away that you would have in a game like Fog of Love, for example, or even D&D, honestly, where it's just kind of like, okay, you're the lead, you're the follow, here's the scene, you got to figure it out, but you got to figure it out together. That takes a lot of trust between the two players, but also like a willingness to be vulnerable and to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah. I think also like think about what you want to, this is maybe one way to approach it, is like think about what you want for your character out of this. Like, what do you want to sort of have the end result be of this? And then like sort of work backwards from there. So like, I want my character to sort of have this arc or go in this direction or have this kind of experience for my character development, and kind of go that way and sort of, what will be the way to put that? Like sort of backwards build that. Backwards design, sort of that. Because I think if you think about that, then it might be a little less daunting than just saying, okay, now I have to flirt. Like, well, that's one way to do it, but you can also like just think about, okay, so like what kind of character arc do I want to have? And like, how do I get there, and kind of work from that approach? Because there's like, as I'm thinking about this, there's other ways we haven't even mentioned to explore romance. Like, you and I play Jeff Stormer's game that's, almost a LARP. What was the Reunited and It Feels. ... Right. Which is kind of a romance game, right? In that you don't have to be romantic in any way. We played it that way. But you're two people who are reunited after some time.
But we were romantic
We played people that were romantic. And so like that game can be a romance game, but like a sort of game of like former love. And actually I've been co-writing a game on breakups and divorce. So like those are also ways to explore sort of the romance space. And so yeah, I think like I would think about what you want to get out of this for your character and kind of then work that way. And that might be a little easier to, I think, than just sort of saying like, now I'm going to try to have a sexual encounter with somebody. Yeah.
I think about something that I went to a panel at Gen Con last year, run by Ali Grauer and Drew Merzieski, who do the Welcome to Warda podcast, and they are married. But Drew was talking about different ways to play a character, and one of them is to sort of narrate what's happening from the outside, and one of them is to sort of play things in character. And I think that there's a balance there too, that if you feel kind of uncomfortable, like I play in a game where I'm very much acting in character for a lot of the time. I am my character. But I think that if you're not super comfortable with that, there's also the ability to step outside of that and kind of narrate things and say, this person does this, and then they do this, and then this is the result. And like, you don't have to necessarily act everything out, and you don't necessarily even have to narrate every part of it, because I think that there's space to explore some things like from the outside too, if you don't feel comfortable acting in that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because you can just sort of take that extra step back and say like, I want my character to do this. And that's again, more for the GM than the player, like to read that situation and facilitate it well.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity for the GM there to say, okay, well, what does that look like when you do that? And sort of ask some guiding questions there to kind of help people figure out what they want to do. So, you can be in that situation where you say like, okay, I want to approach this other person. Okay, well, what do you say? And, and then like kind of even take it step by step and say like, now what next? Because I think that like, when you go up to it and you say, I want to flirt with this person and I hope they'll go out on a date with me, it's kind of broad. But like if you can, as a GM or even like as the other player, if you're doing it between players, kind of help guide and facilitate some of that, I think it makes it a little bit easier too.
Yeah, and even as a GM, you could step back a little bit and instead of saying, what do you say, what does your character say? In this instance, what does your character do? Because that might make people that are new to this sort of experience be able to also step back like, oh yeah, we're playing a game. We're telling a story here. This isn't me that I'm playing. What does my character think of this situation? What would my character say in this situation? Kind of gets you into that sort of mindset, which I believe would be extremely helpful, especially when you're just starting out trying to use romance in the game.
Yeah, that separation between yourself and your character can be really important in those early stages, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me how similar what you just described is to a lot of other stuff in RPGs too, where you might be like, I really want to like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, I really want to climb that wall and get the bell from the bell tower or something. And then the GM might be like, okay, so like, what do you do first? What do you use to try to climb the wall? Right? So like GMs guide players through all the time. So to like similarly do that, to like, it's basically the same thing, right? Just sort of like, okay, so what exactly would you like your character to say in this, moment? And like, it's just because there's a lot more wall climbing and, fighting in role-playing games typically.
Right, because in a lot of games like D&D, there are rules for those things, and there aren't rules. Like if you're not playing a particular romance game, you're making up a lot of that narrative. And so that like a wide open space can feel sort of daunting, I think. I also think that there's value in saying like, okay, I as a person don't know this, but my character would. And so, like while the GM can sort of facilitate that narratively by asking those kinds of questions, I mean, it's really common for you to say like, I don't know, I do the computer thing. I don't know anything about computers. I'm sure I rolled well and it worked fine. I'm not going to narrate that out because I have no clue what I'm talking about. And so I think like while I encourage people to go a little bit further than that, there is value in understanding. It's okay if you want to play a character that's like super suave and you as a person are just not like that. It's okay to kind of explore that space and say, I don't know, my character says something like super hot. Okay. Sure, that's fine. If that's the best that you like feel comfortable with, totally fine. And hopefully over time, like the more that you do that, you'll kind of have room to like grow in that. You don't have to be super great at acting out these romances right away. Like give yourself some time to get better at it.
I'm going to try that in real life when I go to work tomorrow. Like I say something really smart.
Yes. Insert great comment here. It's very witty.
I was just thinking, like, I as Ben don't know how to flirt really well, but I bet this character does, so fill it in. Yep.
I wish we could say that more. And so, like, I feel like, you know, like, let your role-playing game be the opportunity to finally do that.
Well, it's funny because your characters can have expertise in all these sorts of different, like, fantastical things, like a wizard that is able to cast spells. We don't know how that feels or what you do to prep for certain things unless it's spelled out in the rule book, you know? So if you're just saying, yeah, I'm going to prep for my spells, it doesn't really matter exactly what that looks like, but everybody at the table knows. So if you can summarize some of the things that you're not as comfortable with your romantic relationships in game, that's also a very valid way to play out romances.
Here's the thing, though, about RPGs. We're all making all of it up anyway. So, I don't know, just make it up.
I'm also making it up all the time, every day in real life.
Right? In real life. Like, we are, I mean, because I am newly single, I'm trying to, like, explore this, like, weird dating space and, like, you know, like was married to a dude and have only dated dudes, and I'm like trying to explore like this queer dating space too. And it's like, oh, I am so not prepared, but I'm just going to pretend I know what I'm doing. So I guess I'll just text this person and say whatever and hope it sounds good. Like it's so terrifying. And like, it might feel that way in your game too, but I promise at least in the game, it's way lower stakes.
Well, truth be told, like that, you know, exploring, like doing romance and sexuality in role-playing games, like is what helped me explore my own gender and sexuality in my life. Like, you know, being able to do that in the safety of gaming is what like pushed my boundaries and opened up my mind to like different possibilities. So, yeah, I think that's awesome. And like you said, the stakes are lower. So, and you're definitely right that like when you jump out there in real life, it's like can be very daunting.
Yeah, I mean, take this opportunity to do it with people that you are friends with in a defined space where you know that you only have to hang out with them for the next 4 hours, and then you can go home and hopefully they'll forget any of this ever happened. I'm just kidding. It won't be that bad. It'll be great.
Well, that kind of brings us to when you're getting into these sorts of romances in your games and you're getting more and more proficient at it, playing these sorts of stories out, it starts to introduce the concept of romantic bleed, where your in-game character feelings could potentially bleed into real life and vice versa. So how can people avoid hard feelings or awkwardness when, say, you're playing out a romance with somebody besides your significant other?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just gave that example about the other, you know, what did you think of that?
I mean, I said, like, I did not care. Like, I thought it was funny. I thought it was a good part to the story. I thought it was important. But I honestly think that all this stuff comes down to communication, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm playing out a romance with somebody who is not my husband, and I don't, like, know them well, or even if I do know them well, I guess, like, being able to say, like, okay, stop for a second, like, out of character, I don't really feel comfortable with this, but what do you think about this? I think just like with any good story that you're telling, you talk about the decisions that you're making when they involve multiple people. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's important too, like, I think you probably can have some kind of romantic bleed, although I don't know that I've experienced it with your significant other. You know, like, you could make a decision in a game that causes some kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, bleed isn't always like in the positive form and it isn't always in the negative form, but I definitely could see a situation where like if you are playing in a game with your significant other and your characters have a disagreement that can like that tension can kind of like, you almost have like, I feel like bleed is almost like an emotional hangover. So like you walk away and it's still there. And, that's an important thing to like have a discussion about and, to like recognize. I mean, a lot of it I think is just being cognizant too of like the defined spaces of like, this is the table and this is real life. And I think having like a debrief afterwards can be really helpful. Like after something like that to say, okay, how did you feel about it? Like, how are you feeling now? Here's who I am as a person, and even just like ground yourself in your space too.
I think that's something that Ben and I are really good at. Like anytime we play a game, we debrief it. And so I think that just comes naturally for us. We're pretty good at talking about our feelings too, but that's intentional as well, So I think, again, intentional communication is what it comes down to. And that's the whole idea behind this nightmare mode of fog of love. Thank you. Fog of love. I think it kind of, the idea behind it counts on that romantic bleed, for lack of a better term.
Oh, yeah. I mean, exploring, like, playing yourselves and then, like, sort of exploring what if we were our same people, but in this different story or in this different scenario. Yeah, that was really interesting way to look at bleed. I think that in all things relationship, like, communication, without a doubt, it's the most important thing. And so communicating, like, in the ways that we've been saying right now, like, communicating with your partner or significant other or whatever, communicating with them about, this is what, even like this is what's going on, like just any level of communication, communicating with the other person who you're like having the flirtation with or the romantic relationship with or whatever it is in the game. Just communicate, and just like try to have mature, honest conversation that like where you talk about your feelings. I don't think we always say this on our show because we give relationship advice, but like there's really no rocket science to it. It's just communicate honestly.
That sounds like that would also cover the next question that we had was, how do you deal with your feelings when feelings between your character and another character bleeds into personal feelings?
I'm sure that happens in games. Like, I'm sure of it because I've seen it. I've heard about it. Usually it's anger. But, that's the answer, to communicate about it. Like, the idea of a debrief, I think, is really important, especially if tensions in your gaming group are high or whatever game you played with another person, whether that's your romantic partner or not, is really tense or intense. Just talking about that at the end, having that debrief, I think, is going to make everybody feel safer the next time you sit down to play.
So how do you think you're like, so trying to have like honest and mature conversations that are like not, how do you have those with folks in such a way as to like, because you're dealing with stuff that's like personal, right? So there's feelings involved already, wherever those are. You mentioned anger as an example, but whatever those feelings are, sometimes feelings make things messy. So like, how do you have those conversations with people, like in a way that when there's emotions involved, I guess I'm trying to ask, that's not too messy.
Like a debrief, you mean?
Yeah, whether it's a debrief or whatever it is when you're trying to talk about it. Like, how do you have those conversations without it being too messy or complicated?
I mean, sometimes you can't avoid messy and complicated, but you still need to have the conversation. But that being said, I think it's important to give those who need space their space. Like, some people may not be ready to have a conversation in that moment. And that's okay. As long as you're committing to having that conversation before you sit down to play again.
Yeah, so as somebody who has like several disorders, but like one of them involves like making emotional regulation very difficult for me. And so I will have like these very intense feelings and I have to sort of like, it's a very manual process for me to say like, okay, is this a proportional reaction? Is this the correct reaction? Is this? And so like I have to play all of that out. And so for me, sometimes I do need a little bit to like walk away and like kind of understand what feelings are really happening and what feelings aren't. And if the level of emotion that I'm experiencing is proportionate to the actual situation too. And so like sometimes I will step away from something for like an hour and be like, wow, I was totally wrong about like, I was really angry about that thing and like, it really was dumb. Or, like I should have been much more upset about it. And now I do need to talk about it because it's continued to bother me. And so I think sometimes stepping back and taking a minute to think it through and think about the level of emotion that you're feeling, why you're feeling it. And if you do decide to talk about it, like, what is the ultimate goal of that conversation? Is it just to like get on the same playing field? Do you have a point that you want to get across to this other person? But like thinking those things through can be really valuable too.
Yeah, and I think if you're having debrief sessions with your group on the regular before things get to a tense part of your campaign or whatever, or even a romantic plotline in the campaign, if you're having those constant debriefs, even when everything's perfectly fine, then it's going to be something that's going to come more natural to you when it comes to the point where, oh, goodness, I am feeling as a person this sort of romantic feeling for this other player that is playing the character that my character is romantically involved with. Now I kind of know a little bit more of a way to be more open and honest because we've been doing that for the past X number of months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good because it can help you have like the next conversations you're going to have with that person because you've been already modeling that good communication. Because I think it's, hey, you know, you develop feelings for someone at the table. Great. Like talk to them about it then. You know, like express those feelings, find a way to express those feelings in a good way, in an open and honest way with that person. Because we just actually kind of had a question on our show that a listener wrote in and said, like, I've been playing games with this person and now I think I'm falling for them and I want to know what to do. And our response was basically like, talk to the person about your feelings, and see what happens.
Why are you asking me, man?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I mean, and I think that that's a thing that we talked about in our, like, lessons learned episode where we talked about like retrospectives and debriefs and things like that, of like normalizing that feedback even when there isn't a problem, so that when you get to the point where there is one, people already feel comfortable having those discussions and doing that back and forth, so that you're not like doing it for the first time when you're in that really emotional space, to like normalize it when there isn't a problem, so that by the time it actually is, if it is, you have the tools and you've built up the sort of infrastructure to have those discussions, right?
Yeah. And role-playing is, when you get to it, when you're telling a good, deep story with your friends, it's a very intimate experience all around. You are embodying these characters. You are putting your own personal thoughts and feelings into playing this character and creating this story. And it's very natural to have some of that feedback into you. So why can't the debrief sessions also be close and not, you know, sexually intimate, obviously, but intimate in a way that says, you know, we can be completely open and honest with one another. We've been doing this amazing role playing. We've been telling these amazing stories with these characters. Why can't we as human beings, individuals, also be amazingly connected with one another after the session?
I think you invented a new euphemism. Let's go have a debrief.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm for it. I reached out to people for questions about this episode, and one of the questions that I got back was how to decide how much romance to incorporate in a game, and like how to figure out like if it's your character's motivation in the game, or if it's just like a plot hook, or if it's like a central part of the plot. How do you kind of navigate how much to put into a game? Yeah,
we're so used to playing all romance games so often, but
all romance all the time.
Yeah, right, all romance all the time. I think you know, like I was sort of saying before, my natural reaction to that question is think about what, I mean, it sort of is built into the question, but think about what you want to get out of this for your character. Yeah. And like, how do you decide that? I don't know. I think like figure out what kind. So like again, session 0 stuff, right? I guess, you know, what kind of game are we playing? And that's sort of a group answer. You know, you sort of like figure that out together.
Literally, what kind of a game are we playing?
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly. And then like, so I really believe in and gain cohesion and like deciding like, okay, we sort of have a feel together that we've all agreed on. This is kind of the genre and feel of what this game is going to be like. And then I think that kind of answers the question then, how much romance is natural to that kind of a game.
Yeah. I think within those parameters though, like if you're playing a game where it's a lot of slash and hack and gerblins and stuff like that, I think that you know, there's room for romance, but it's going to be a lot more stilted than maybe another type of game. And so once you determine that part, like the flavor of your game, so to speak, then, you know, within that, like what kind of story are you trying to tell? You know, what's your character about? And like you were saying, like, what is your character? What is their motivation? What are you trying to get for your character out of this romance?
Yeah, do you want it to be like, do they have an arc that involves this romance, or is it just like a plot hook for, you know, we talked about having, you know, past relationships and things like that. Like, is it a plot hook for the GM to kind of pull on, or is this a story about interpersonal dynamics and trying to figure that out? And I think those are really important questions to ask at the beginning of the game. And that's not to say that they can't change over time, because we've all been in those games where things go so far from what we thought they were. But I think that those are central questions that you should ask, along with, you know, are we playing a silly game? Are we playing a serious game? What system are we using? What do I want for my character in this story?
Yeah, I'm thinking of an instance when I was playing in a game where one of the characters, like their sort of whole dynamic, like what their character was like, was that they were sort of a lady killer type. You know, like they were always out there meeting somebody every night, kind of like being wild. And it was a character played by a woman, but she was playing a man in the game and wanted to play this lady killer. But like the interesting thing about the character development was that she, like the situation she ended up getting into, like her character got into, was like being forced to settle down with somebody. Not being forced, but it was sort of complicated, but like finding somebody who then she ended up getting settled down with. So romance was central to sort of this character, like from the get-go, because it was in the initial sort of description. But it ended up being like very different than kind of the way it was laid out in the beginning. And it was a really fun arc that got to explore, like, okay, how does this character handle this different situation? So it's still like this romance thing, but in a very different way. And that just stands out to me as it was just like a really fun example of a romance themed character in an adventure game, like a very high adventure game.
Yeah, I think it can lead to cool moments of character development where you know, kind of change over time to see, like, your motivations change, you know?
So how do we navigate a situation where one player is interested in pursuing a romantic relationship or a romantic plotline, but that it either doesn't fit the story or is unwanted by the other party?
I think the first part, doesn't fit the story, is easier to deal with, because I think that you can talk about, like, all the things we just mentioned. What are you trying to gain from this? What part of the story are you trying to tell? What is this a tool, you know, for moving forward? And either recreate it to something that does fit the story, or decide as a team to nix it all together. Unwanted by the other party is, at least in my eyes, difficult, because it means, to me, that's like a red flag that that person playing that character isn't quite reading things correctly. So I think, again, it's just about being open and honest. Like, I know you really want to explore this, but I don't feel comfortable with it. You know, if you've set things up right in your group, then that'll be the end of it. If only it were so easy, right?
I mean, I think, like, as I was writing the questions for this episode too, part of me was like, oh, they're all going to have the same answer, and it's going to be, just talk about it. Just say it. You know, like, those, I get really frustrated with, like, movie plots where, like, the whole thing could have been solved if people would have just freaking talk to each other. And I think that, like, you know, so many of these questions come down to, it's like, just say it. Like, just use your words, as I tell my children. Use your words.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're a player and you want to have a romantic, like, plot line or a relationship or whatever, no matter whether that's like flirting or like that's the thing, is like, because it can take so many different forms. I think that's like, if you're a player, you could talk to the other PCs, talk to your friends at the table, talk to your GM about that. And like, I can't imagine a game where some version of romance will not fit in any way.
Mm-hmm.
If you have like a half decent GM and they know you want that in the game, it's going to add to the fun, and it's going to add to the fun of everybody, maybe not just you. Like you're going to find a way to make it add to the fun of everybody, I think. And then I think it's similar to like if it's unwanted by the other party, like where, and this is more of the GM thing, I think, than a player. Oh, well, I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like sort of shared responsibility by the players, but to like sort of steer that, because again, there's a different way to do it. If like you want to have a romantic plotline or a romantic related experience as a player, and like you initially think, okay, I want it with this other PC. Well, like, you know, you should be able to steer that towards a different direction. Keep the thing you want to have, which is this romantic experience, but like find a different way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, like you said, is just by talking about it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's also the possibility if it's more of a, you know, I'd be comfortable with a romantic plotline, but I don't see my character being interested in your character.
Yeah.
Then you could play that out like that. It's I guess that would be another type of romantic dichotomy of one person is pursuing this other person and the other person is denying the pursuit, and in a very consensual sort of way at the table and in the story. And that could be making for a really interesting story that could have, you know, some story ramifications later on, which would be really cool.
Yeah, I think if you're the GM in the situation, you can very easily say like, hey, would you guys like to play that out in characters? That's something you feel safe and comfortable doing, because that could be a cool like experience to have together. And like just naming that and offering it. And then if the answer is no, like it's no. But if it's yes, that's even better.
Yeah, I had a game where it was my long-running L5R game, but one of the disadvantages in there is bitter betrothal because everything is an arranged marriage. And so I played out with one of the other, my ex-husband was running this game, and I played out this plot line with like his best friend of like, we were supposed to be married and we had to like pretend that we liked each other and we really hated each other. And it's like this form of this romantic plot line still where you can kind of have that and explore some of those concepts, but like you don't ever have to flirt with each other or, you know, anything like that. And I remember him, my ex, like messaging his friend and was like, will you marry my wife in our dumb samurai game? I was like, yes, sure. Will you fake marry my wife in our dumb samurai game? Okay, why not? But I think that those are cool stories. Like those are still technically like romantic plot lines of like playing out this situation of like one person likes the other person and, you know, it's an unrequited thing, or like you are supposed to be married or whatever and you do not like them, or, you know, like there are different ways to play those things out too and still have those kinds of stories.
Yeah. And I think it, like we said, it all boils down to communication, but also don't be creepy.
Oh, that's my favorate bit of gaming advice. Don't be creepy.
What if you just are creepy though?
Yeah, I don't think I can play D&D anymore.
Well, as long as everybody's
just try and rein it in.
As long as everybody's okay with it, I think that's fine.
There you go.
But that
goes back to that communication.
Exactly. Communication first.
Guys, I just want to let you know I'm kind of creepy and I want to make sure you're okay with that. Do you have any other points that you want to bring up or that you feel like we didn't touch on at all?
Well, guys, I feel like I'm a little bit creepy.
Yeah, you're bringing it up right now. I just think
Hi, Mel.
I just think we've already said this a bunch of ways, but you can't say it enough that like consent is just so crucial. And I say that as somebody that like that didn't always necessarily as a GM in the past like do that well. Like to like really just make sure, I know we've talked about it a lot already, but just make sure like can't hammer it home enough, because I think like you've got to make sure people at the table are willing to consent to that. And again, if you're a player, also same thing, just like consent, I think is so important. I can't stress that one enough.
Yeah, I always say that, like, I don't have very many, like, you must do this in your game, but everyone consenting to things is, like, my one hard, you must do this. Like, this is a bad game if you do not do this.
Totally.
Yeah, but other than that, I love playing out romance scenarios. It is something that's great if you're have a partner or partners and you want to like explore different kinds of romance with them or different kinds of sexualities or like relationships with them, or even like play out like what this might look like if we did this, like sort of expand your horizons. I think romance games are a great way to do that, and I definitely think they enhance non-romance centric games too.
I'm a firm believer that all games can be therapeutic, but I think romance games especially, because for teenagers who are coming of age or anybody of any age who is exploring sexuality, gender, any type of feeling that would fit in that romantic category, it's a safe space to explore those things and figure out, exactly where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. Thank you both so much for sitting down with us. I really enjoyed this. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah,
so great.
We enjoyed it too. Well, I enjoyed it. I can't talk for Ben.
I did enjoy it too. I'll turn my hat backwards so you know how much I enjoyed it.
Oh, look at how excited he is.
Wow, we finally did it.
Awesome. Well, Ben, can you remind everyone where they can find you and your projects online?
A bunch of my projects that are gaming related are all at allportsopen.com, so folks can find there or on, wherever podcatcher you get our podcasts. You can find Pot of Love and the other ones that I'm on. I'm also on Twitter. I have so many Twitter handles. I'm trying to remember what my personal one is.
What's the most important podcast that you do, dear?
Pot of Love.
So where can people contact us and send us their questions?
At Pot of Love on Twitter.
Where could they email questions to?
potoflove@gmail.com.
Where?
potoflove@gmail.com.
Where?
potoflove@gmail.com.
Thank you. You remembered the new song.
No, that was different. It was totally different.
Oh,
yeah,
you could have totally said yup and kept it moving, and I would have believed you.
But I'm also on Twitter personally as at Benjamin Wallis. My name. That shouldn't have been so hard to remember.
And Mel, what about you?
This is my project.
That's okay.
You can find us on All Ports Open in podcatchers. If you're looking for us on Spotify, you actually have to search Fog of Love, even though it is called Pog of Love. No, it's not. Oh my God.
Pog of Love is a different thing. That's our next project.
Was that late 90s nostalgia?
Yes. Love of Pogs.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good. You should do that for April Fools. You should make, and it's just like all about how much you love Pogs.
That's my new project. Thank you for helping me announce it on air. Pog of Love. In all seriousness, you can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, all those catchers. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
And
children.
Yeah.
They melt your brain.
Yeah.
You can email me at potoflove@gmail.com and ask me questions about my melty brain or romance.
Or Pogs, apparently.
You can ask me about Pogs. I may take a while to get back to you.
There's some research to do.
Gotta find those slammers.
Oh my gosh.
You already remember more about Pogs than I do.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you to everybody that is listening right now. We will see you next time. Character Evolution Cast, like Character Creation Cast, is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network, and it can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts and guests, or even find some of our character sheets. Character Creation Cast can be found on Twitter at CreationCast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast it originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems discussed and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We will see you next time.
Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you will find other great shows like Warda.
Warda is an original fantasy actual play podcast created by Ali Grauer and Drew Marziewski. It's 1 part Game of Thrones, 2 parts Downton Abbey, served on the rocks with a twist of Agatha Christie. Discover magic, mystery, and more than a little socio-political commentary along the way. The city holds thousands of stories. What will yours be?